I have to say, this is always what I wonder about, especially like ancient documents. Can you imagine if in 2,000 years' time, the only insight into
the Planet of the Apes find
English popular culture was the AVForums podcast?
Imagine if they built a religion around it.
Yeah.
It was a strange time. So, yeah.
We're that tired we can't even bother to finish sentences.
It's going to be an amazing podcast.
Dust off the tumbleweed, someone.
Or maybe you need one
Part
of those
two.
You need one of those ECG machines just flatlining.
It's free. It's not like they got to pay for this.
Oh, there's my intro. Hello and welcome to the AVForums podcast for the 1st of October 2014, and joining me on this edition are assistant editor Steve Withers,
Get busy living or get busy dying,
games editor Mark Botwright,
Damn near worn down to the nub,
and reviewer Ed Selley.
Same old shit, different day.
Welcome back to the big, wide, wonderful world of the AVForums podcast. It's like a lifelong prison sentence, listeners. We are here again this week, and it seems that the AV industry is on go slow at the minute when it comes to news and new information in general. Being announced, absolutely nothing recently. So let's kick off the podcast with some competition. Steve, what can our listeners win?
Hang on, Phil. What the f*** my running order gone?
I don't know. Do you need
Are we going to play the
email it
music
back
from
to
the
you?
old Tony Hawk competitions over the back of this? We can't send your entries back to you.
Oh, there it is. Put it on play. No, that's not it.
Did we manage to get a minute's worth of good material before this happened?
We are so on the ball.
Right, do you want to answer that question again?
No, because I can just edit in the answer.
What was the question? Well, you can win the Danny Boyle collection on Blu-ray, which includes 127 hours, Sunshine, which is a film I've got to say that I didn't like when I first saw it, but now I really like, Slumdog Millionaire, and 28 Days Later. I'm not sure how good that one's going to look on Blu-ray, though, because it was shot on standard def TV, wasn't it?
But that's not the Danny Boyle collection. Where's Charlotte Grave and Trainspot?
Well, yeah, obviously it's the Danny Boyle recent films collection. But no, they're all good movies. Nothing wrong with any of those films. Obviously, you won the Oscar for Slumdog Millionaire. So
That's right, Steve. Sell the sizzle. Nothing wrong with any of those films.
yeah.
What a prize!
And one of them might not look great. Other than that, please enter.
Other than that, it's free. It's free to enter, so you may as well.
Basically, if you want to watch a zombie film where no one gets called a zombie and they run around really fast, 28 Days Later. If you want to watch a film where a guy has to cut off his own arm, 127 hours. Sunshine, where they have to restart the sun with a massive nuclear bomb. So that's going to happen. And Slumdog Millionaire, which is kind of like a Westerner's view of being Indian. Anyway, that's
Move
one
over,
prize.
Cosmo Landsman.
The other prize is Edge of Tomorrow, which is the new Tom Cruise movie where basically he keeps... it's a bit like playing a video game. He dies and resets. And I have to say, I saw it at the cinema and really enjoyed it. I thought it was excellent. I thought it was one of the most enjoyable films I've seen this year, and certainly one of the most underrated, and unfortunately didn't do very well at the box office, but it was significantly better than a lot of other films that did do well, and is worth checking out. So that's a good prize. And
Does
then
it
Maleficent.
Does it have Emily Blunt in it, doesn't it?
It does have Emily Blunt in it, yes.
Well, it's worth it for that on its own.
Fair point.
And it's free.
Yeah,
And, well,
might
yeah,
as well.
free. And finally, Maleficent with Angelina Jolie, where she plays the villain from Sleeping Beauty. And again, I saw that at the cinema, and I have to say, quite enjoyed it. It sort of tells the story from a very different perspective, i.e. from the perspective of Maleficent herself. But I thought Jolie was absolutely superb in it. I mean, just perfect casting, really, and she looked incredible in the makeup and everything. So there's some pretty good prizes there, in my opinion.
Yeah, and dead easy to win those, because the answers to the questions can be found on the website. You just have to click around and you'll find the answers. So there you go. That's competitions that we've got running at the moment. Just give us a sec.
Are you entering, Phil? Is that what you're doing?
No,
People who work for the site can't.
unfortunately, I can't. I'm an employee. Yeah.
Oh,
Nor can you, Ed, by the way.
what, with the same level of enthusiasm and verve that you just plugged these?
Well, you could plug it since you reviewed them.
At least we're honest. dear listener. You know what I mean? You know, at least you know when you read our reviews that we are being honest about what we say in our reviews, because you know I don't think we could be falsely positive about anything, Steve, could we?
Well,
right.
like I said, I mean, there's some good films there. I'd be happy to win them.
Good for you. Right, let's move on. Highlights of September, because it is a new month. We are into October. Only 3 months and 6 days to go until we head off to CES. Steve?
God.
Are you looking forward to it? Yeah, I thought maybe.
Yeah.
Right, but September did see IFA 2014. The 1 year, Ed, I don't think you have been to IFA this year, did you?
No, I didn't make it out. As I understand it, I missed a lot of curved televisions. So whether I missed anything at all is hard to say.
Yeah, behind
Although
the
you know
curve.
me, I missed the white goods and the achingly lovely German models just making cake. You know, and the surrealism of the Karcher pressure washer stand. Maybe I'm just not on message enough to go for anyone to spend out for me to go for IFA when those are my highlights.
Yeah, but interesting you did say curved TVs, because there was a hell of a lot of them. It looks like Samsung have started another trend. They started the whole LED TV, although it's not an LED TV trend. They've now started the curved TV trend. Everybody following suit on that one. Should only really have been OLED TVs that have the curve, Steve, because it makes sense on that technology, but it seems to be everything's curved now, and even the stands are curved, and speakers are now being curved.
Yeah, it's curvilicious these days, isn't it, as far as AV kit goes. I think we discussed this at length last week. But yeah, I think ultimately we came to the conclusion it's a matter of personal preference, isn't it? If you like curves, fantastic. I like curves in certain aspects, not necessarily on TVs. But
Boom, boom.
boom, boom, tish, thank you, I'll be all week, try the veal. You know, if you like them, great. If you don't, well, there are flat TVs available, so go for those instead.
So yeah, curved TVs everywhere, lots of 4K TVs, and for the first time, Steve, a bit of 4K confirmation when it comes to content in terms of Blu-ray, although we had that confirmation and now it's gone completely deadly silent again.
Yeah, it was a bit I was expecting a bit more fanfare, and it was kind of like announced to a few journos in a press room very discreetly. So it was hardly considered big news, but it was good to hear that they were at least saying, yes, we are going to do it. Yes, we are going to see players next year. Whether we'll see any content to go with it is another issue entirely, but certainly 4K Blu-ray is coming in about a year's time, which is great news if you're a fan of 4K but want something perhaps slightly more higher spec than just streaming.
Obviously we're now at the end of the month and we've had all the news, and there's nothing to talk about come the end of the month, but it has not in everywhere.
Sorry, hang on a second.
Did you not learn this from last week's podcast?
Yeah, I forgot to just mute me while you're talking.
You just don't appreciate how much cocaine it takes to get with us through a normal day.
If that was his review of the Danny Boyle collection on coke, I'd hate to hear it beforehand. The level of enthusiasm.
He can't do sentences without it, didn't you know? It's like John Belushi circa 1980. He's got to have it pumped straight into him, otherwise he just can't function at all.
I imagine him having like a mask like Bane.
You were in banking, Steve. I mean, there must have been wall-to-wall powdered self-esteem.
I can't comment.
Which means yes, it was.
You might think that. I couldn't possibly comment.
IFA in Germany, a big show, lots of nice big news stories which we've all covered in great deal of depth in other podcasts, but basically 4K Blu-ray announced. Sony had a new 4K projector at the $5,000 price mark, which is unheard of. Lots of curved TVs, lots of 4K TVs, and it's all building up nicely for CES in January, isn't it, Steve?
Yeah, I think I hope there'll be some surprises at CES, although to be perfectly honest, unless there's some OLED news, it's looking like more curves, more 4K, and that'd be about it. And maybe some more smart TV features, I suppose. I don't know. I mean, can you think of anything else that's in the pipeline that might sort of break at CES?
Our boredom levels?
Interesting, you said OLED, because at the time of recording you are going for a briefing tomorrow, which and it hasn't been cancelled yet, so it must still be happening. We won't go into any great details, but it is a briefing about OLED, and it could highlight the roadmap for the next few months ahead with that technology.
Yeah, absolutely. Fingers crossed we get some interesting news about OLED tomorrow, which obviously we'll talk about at length in the next podcast. And there'll be a piece up on the site, I guess, on the day this podcast goes up, actually on the Wednesday. But yeah, I mean, hopefully we'll get some interesting news on OLED. I mean, I still think there's potential there. It's just it's largely being pushed by a single manufacturer at the moment. But fingers crossed we'll see a lot more OLED action at CES.
Hopefully. Right, okay, like I said, we're into a new month. It is October. So we have a whole new lineup of product waiting to be reviewed. So let's go Ed first. Ed, what do you have coming in the next month?
Lots from me, mainly because obviously my unique and entirely shambolic work schedule means everything is piled into the end. But over the next few weeks, you are going to see the brand new Grado SR225E. And I don't doubt that you'll look at the photos and go, they're not new at all. They look like all the Grados I've ever seen before, and you'd be entirely right. But literally every single part of them has been changed, updated and tweaked, despite the fact they look like they escaped from the 1950s. So that's going to be appearing. Monitor Audio have decided to take a break from speakers, and they've built a Class AB streaming AirPlay amplifier, which is currently sat in front of me. And it might look a bit odd, but actually it's quite something. So hopefully that'll be a review worth checking out. And then we also have one of the brand new and rather radical Naim Muso systems. It's Naim's first ever all-in-one, by which I mean not just the electronics in one box, it's got the speakers in there as well. It's the least expensive product. It's the first one not made in Salisbury. It's a very, very... we overuse bold in the context of audio products. Most things are, it's just a new audio product. This is actually quite a big departure for them. It's a technically interesting product. It's quite a bold product. So that promises to be quite a good review. And just for you, Phil, I've actually got one stuck in my ear at the moment so I can monitor the podcast. I've got a pair of earphones in the pipeline, because, we did the £600 Sennheiser IE800s, and I can remember you going, who on earth would spend £600 on a pair of earphones? Well, the question this time out is who on earth is going to spend £999 on a pair of earphones? So that's to come as well. Unfortunately, I can't tell you a brand yet. That's under embargo. But just throw the idea of spending as near as it makes no difference, a bag of sand on a pair of earphones. Dramatic pause.
I think it was too much enthusiasm.
Grados sound very much like the Porsche 911 of...
There's a distinct element of that, but I would argue that Grado is even more conservative. I mean, the 911, it does change. It just stays the same shape. Grados just don't change. You can't actually say they have retro styling, because they didn't set out to make them retro. They look like that from the start, and they just still look like that, and you either like it or you don't. But I would say that this E series, the latest revision, there are a lot of changes to them under the hood, and it's quite an interesting step forward.
It's nice to hear enthusiasm in your voice, Ed. You're obviously happy about your lot this month.
I'm doing what I can, and I'm sure that additional to the reviews, I'll think of something to write about as an article. What that is, I don't yet know, but it'll be something. It'll undoubtedly be immense.
Okay, and if anybody has suggestions, then you can tweet us at AVForums, hashtag what the should Ed write?
That's how we keep the quality up.
We're crowdsourcing our ideas.
This isn't just thrown together, folks. This is well planned.
This is M&S thrown together. Or is it S&M thrown together? Right.
Or AVF thrown together.
Spears and Munsell.
Steve, that was actually quite funny. There's no need to walk out.
There's a door creaking in the background somewhere.
Sorry, that was me.
He's sneaking out.
No.
First beer of the afternoon, is it?
I'd love to, but I have to collect my son. From baby group in a bit, so it's probably best not to turn up smelling of beer. They tend to notice.
Yeah, that's frowned upon, definitely.
Yeah.
Right. We haven't got anything from Mark here. What's coming up games-wise in the next month?
Coming up in the next month?
Yeah.
In short, I haven't sent out the orders for next month yet.
So it could be anything.
So it could literally be anything.
Again, if you'd like to make suggestions, then tweet us at AVForums with the hashtag what should the games team do. That work?
Yeah, why not?
Can I just say, I did actually, as a technical concept, I really liked the rolling updates to Destiny review process. I'm not going to pretend, as someone who's quite a long time out of computer games, that I understood all of it, but I just liked, rather than piling through as much of the game as you can and then ultimately only giving a snapshot from a single piece, I thought there's much more. I know we're not supposed to use the word in reviewing, but I think it works here. There's much more insight into what the game actually does.
Oh, you didn't use that word.
I did, because
I think you can say insight in this context. It's not.
I think in this context, insight is correct.
Yeah,
and I think that was a fine idea. Was it Mr. Carter that did it?
No, that was Leon.
Okay, well that shows how
Leon
much attention
Matthews.
I was paying to the details. Well, sorry, Leon. I thought it was really quite impressive. So yeah, I'm looking forward to you doing it to Angry Birds.
Well, yeah, I mean, he seemed to enjoy writing it that way, and it suited the game. So it's definitely something that we're kind of looking at possibly doing more of in the future, because it's certainly it's a way to get across how you slowly get into a game and where you are at a given point, because too often, I think, with certain games, if they're supposed to have a kind of long tail to them, you can kind of get bogged down in the early few hours and feel that you're not kind of seeing the same game that someone's reviewing and giving a glowing score or something like that. So it's a different way of looking at it.
Definitely.
If you'd like to see more of that, please write in on a postcard.
On a postcard. Oh, that's so 20th century.
Yeah,
Good.
Games team doesn't do email
or Twitter. Right, Yamaha. Their first Atmos receiver. That
they've got two. They've got the one that Ed's currently got.
Yes,
3040.
I've got the 3040.
Yeah, and I've just got the RXA 2040. These are both going to be Atmos-enabled receivers. They're not quite just yet. The software upgrade is due, I believe, this week. I will be getting my copy of, unfortunately, Transformers, the first Blu-ray with an Atmos soundtrack at some point this week. It's actually released in the States on the 30th of September. Mine was shipped last week, so I should be getting it any day. And I'm in the process of sticking speakers on the ceiling. So hopefully next week I'll be able to do the first full hands-on Atmos, review of an Atmos receiver.
You make it sound so Blue Peter. I'm just sticking speakers to my ceiling. You've got your sticky black plastic out.
Sadly, Ed, that's almost exactly how I'm getting it up there. So if I'm killed by a falling speaker, the irony won't be lost on me.
Righty. Okay, fair enough. Well, you will be, I'll say fondly missed. Maybe a lie, but I'll say just for the record, you'll be fondly missed.
But hopefully we should very soon be able to actually do a full-on. Are you planning on rigging some speakers on the ceiling for the 3040?
I'd be lying if I said it was an immediate priority. I've got to put there's so much work that needs doing to this lounge, because the whole idea is that both the AV and the 2-channel systems are going to be in here. But regrettably, I lost a couple of days last week for family reasons. That's why I wasn't on last week's podcast. And there's just a stupid amount to do. And I've just that's with the existing equipment, let alone adding more to the ceiling. But we'll see. I think it's going to be predicated, Steve, on there being more films available than Transformers: Age of Extinction. I'm just throwing that out there as well. I'm not going to the hassle for a Transformers film.
I saw somebody had written on Twitter that they had the Dolby Atmos demo disc and it had no film clips on it.
Well, what's on it then? Just
some
trailers.
music track.
Oh, is that it?
Yeah.
Oh, right. So that's a massive waste of time then.
So it doesn't really bode well for the big onslaught of Blu-ray releases that are going to be in Dolby Atmos, but we'll wait and see. Other equipment that you have in, Steve, Optoma HD36 projector.
Yeah, that's just arrived as well. it's another one of Optoma have been releasing quite a few what we would call budget projectors recently. They did the HD50, which I reviewed a few months ago, and that was about £1,000. And then we just reviewed the HD26, which is around the £600 mark, and now we've got the 36, which is sort of between the two. Yeah, I mean, single chip DLP and a fairly attractive price point. So I haven't had a chance to put it through its paces yet, but that should be coming up this week.
And Stone the Crows, I'm actually reviewing something this month.
Easy.
Yeah, I know. Calm down. Epson have sent me through the TW6600W, which means it's got wireless HDMI. Interesting.
Oh, that's clever.
Not really set it up and used it yet, but looks clever. Steve, you've looked at one with this technology before, so I take it works.
Yeah. I've done quite a few actually. They're the 3-chip LCD. And I mean, I think Epson makes solid projectors, good performers. They've got good calibration controls on them. You need a bit of tweaking out of the box to get them to look accurate. But
bloody hell, that's an understatement.
But they can deliver very good pictures. The 3D on them is quite good as well.
Yeah, well, I've got to say, there was a pair of glasses there, which is unusual nowadays, because nowadays they don't bother sending glasses with these projectors. So there are 3D glasses there. There is this box that does the HDMI via Wi-Fi, which has got 5 inputs on it, which is really good for this level of projector. It's priced about £1,700. It's a 3 LCD. Out of the box settings, absolutely abysmal. You've got to switch everything off, basically. It comes with everything switched on, and I'm trying to remember what I was using to warm it up. I think it was Captain Phillips, and it just looked it looked like there was a swarm of mosquitoes on screen. It was so bad. All the sharpness controls turned up to full whack. But once I switched everything off and set it up to soak in, because I like to get quite a few hours on the bulb before I do any testing. It looked really, really nice once everything was switched off and tamed down. And out of the box wise, because let's face it, I don't think people are going to calibrate this level of projector unless they have the gear and they can do it themselves. They're not going to hire somebody like you, Steve, who charges an absolute fortune to come around and calibrate on such a lowly projector. But in terms of out of the box, which is what you've then got to base it on, once you switched everything off and put it into cinema mode and did a few out of the box settings, so a couple of test patterns up for brightness and contrast and so on, it looked, for £1,600, it looked really nice on a 110-inch scope screen. Looked really, really nice.
Well, you can't say fair on that then, can you?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to sitting down and actually testing it. I haven't had a chance to do that yet. Like I say, I put it on for a few hours to kind of soak the bulb in and put a few hours on that, because they're usually very, very bright out of the box, and you want to try and get at least 10 to 20 hours. I'm not sure what you aim at, Steve, but
about 20 hours I can. Yeah,
10 or 20 hours. And if it's a high-end machine, I sometimes try and put about 50 onto it and see how it holds up, between 50 and 100 on some of them. If they're known to have issues of bulb dimming and so on, I will just leave it on 24 hours a day. But I haven't done that with Epson, so looking forward to reviewing that. And that kind of brings us on to a question. We're both reviewing what we'd call budget projectors, Steve. And certainly it seems to be the only part of the projector market that still seems to have some margin in it for manufacturers, because there seems to be lots of models come out in the price point of about £500 up to about £2,000. Now, the problem there is that there's lots of variance in terms of quality, and some of them that you see are just plastic with plastic lenses and a bulb, and yes, you could probably play some games on it because it's not, image accuracy is not the highest priority and so on. So you can go from anything from that to the latest Sony entry-level model, which is based on an award winner and is under £2,000.
Yeah, I mean, when you start looking at this at the cheaper end of the projector market, you get a lot of what I would call data grade projectors, manufacturers who make projectors for presentations and schools and that kind of thing, businesses, where the idea is it's bright and you can project a large image, and that's the main criteria for these projectors. And those obviously don't necessarily make particularly good home cinema projectors. So if you're buying a projector for watching movies, particularly maybe for gaming and TV as well, but definitely if you're buying one for watching movies, you want to try and get a projector that's is going to deliver a degree of color accuracy and some half decent blacks, because otherwise, I think you're going to be missing out on the potential of a big screen experience. what defines how we define a budget projector? My definition would be anything below about $3,000. And most people think, well, that's really expensive. But when you consider how expensive projectors can get, I think $3,000 and less is sort of the budget-ish range. As Phil's just pointed out, there isn't a lot going on right now in the projector market. There's quite a lot going on in the sort of $2,000, even the $1,000 and below market. The sort of mid-range, $3,000 to $5,000. Currently, there's JVC's X500, they're still making it, and the new Sony that was announced at IFA a few weeks ago, the VW300, which will be £5,500 for a 4K projector, which is quite interesting. But and above that, you haven't got much either. You've got the VW500, and then you're sort of into the rarefied atmosphere of Sim2s and that kind of thing. But even they've been incredibly quiet recently. So really, all the action is going on in the budget end of the market. We've seen a lot of projectors released in the last couple of years there, from the likes of BenQ, from Epson, from Optoma, so two of the names we mentioned earlier in this podcast, and Sony. If you get to sort of the below £1,000 bracket, it's very much dominated by single chip DLP. So there you're looking at people like BenQ, Vivitech, Optoma, they all do single chip DLP. And you can get some pretty good. I mean, I've viewed quite a few BenQs of late, and they've got a couple there: W1070 and W1080 single chip DLP projectors, £800, £700 price bracket, not too bad. Good performance, bright, reasonably accurate color performance. They've got some calibration controls in there. Motion handling's great. Blacks aren't fantastic, but quite often with these kind of projectors, people are using them in rooms that aren't dedicated rooms, so they'll have light colour walls, so it's not so much of an issue.
Well, this is what we're going to come on to, because if you're spending that type of money, the last thing I'm then going to tell people is, and no offence, Steve, is to go and hire a calibrator, or to go and buy a dedicated screen. If you're spending £1,000 or under, there's not much point in doing that, I don't think. I mean, really, no. I know some people that spend £7,000-8,000 on a projector and project it onto a white wall. I wouldn't do that. I would then say no, 10%, about 20% of the budget, spend it on a decent screen. But this type of and when you get to this type of level, I think this is where it gets a bit more mainstream and it becomes a bit more useful for the everyday AV enthusiast, because when you're talking about let's say £1,500 and under. These are the types of machines where you can put them away in the cupboard, and when there is a big event like the World Cup or the Olympics or the Scottish referendum vote, or some big screen action that you want to watch, you can go and get the projector out the cupboard, set it up, project it at the wall. And some of these projectors have speakers inbuilt, which I wouldn't recommend. At least make the effort to try and have some kind of outboard sound system, but a couple of stereo speakers, or even a sound bar, TV sound coming through that, projecting through a projector onto a wall for an event, a big event. I don't think you can go wrong, and as long as you're not getting silly and buying screens and calibrating them and all the rest of them, I think out of the box you could get away with that.
Got it in for you today with us.
Yeah.
I genuinely think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, but I think a lot of people would be interested in going that way, especially when it comes to games and some of the types of games out there where it is quite cinematic, and a big screen with a little bit of surround sound could really add to the experience.
Yeah, I think so. I think obviously the biggest factor is still kind of this sense of a projector tends to dominate a room. I mean, the size that they are now, the size that you can get them, as you say, you can kind of put it away. It's not something that has to be a permanent feature. And if you're projecting on a wall, then you don't obviously have to line it up perfectly. You can just get it out and fire it at, so long as the walls are the right color. It definitely works for gaming, where you don't need kind of perfect color fidelity. You just need something that is bright enough to show the kind of more lurid colors. And so long as it's got a reasonable amount of contrast with, say, you're not in a totally light room. But even then, I know a lot of people who've used them during the day and the like, who don't have kind of blackout curtains or anything like that. And just so long as it's bright enough, you can tell the image there. Then it still adds something cinematic to it.
I guess this is the point, Steve. Forget about deep blacks. Forget about impressive shadow detail, because you ain't going to get them at this price point, whether you're in a Batcave or or in a light coloured room. So what you're looking for is a projector that is plenty bright enough, that's not overly lurid on the colours. At least you can get the colours looking natural. A lot of these projectors, like you say, they come with some of them basic calibration controls, others with really quite in-depth, but as long as you shove it in the correct picture mode, basically follow our picture perfect setup procedures. We've designed it for TVs, it works for projectors in exactly the same way. You could have quite a nice system there with a nice 100-inch image on a white wall for the big events, like I say, you know, and some sound, and away you go. And it seems like a no-brainer, Ed, so why are the public not jumping on board with it?
Exposure to projectors on DEM is somewhere between slim and none. It's a bit of a jump for something to buy online. I mean, don't get me wrong, if you've already bought a projector first time out, buying a replacement one online, yeah, that makes perfect sense. But I don't know about you, but I'd at least want some level of proof of concept. And if you're just looking at it with a click-to-buy option, maybe I'm just getting old and timid, but I'd be reticent. I think that's half the problem.
Or just not drunk enough.
Well, there is. Oh, come on, if I'm drunk, Phil, I'll be on Discogs buying records. I won't be looking at projectors. So therein lies the other part of the problem. But yeah, I think that's half of it, and I think there's also still a belief that projectors are either something that, you know, you get bored to death with PowerPoint presentations in the office, or they're hulking great pieces of, you know, semi-pro equipment that, you know, you need to be a professional bodybuilder to move in and out of a cupboard. So that leaves people a bit sort of worried about how, you know, as you point out, some of these new ones are very, very easy to you know, set up on a temporary basis, but I don't know if that's widely appreciated by the general public.
Is there still a question about bulb life as well? Because it seems like the first fact that most people, when they look about, you know, the feasibility of a projector, someone will tell you, well, you'll have to replace a bulb after X amount of hours, and that can be into the hundreds.
But when does it become a disposable item, though? You know, at what price point does that for the public become a disposable item? Where, I mean, at the minute, let's look at printers for an example, right? It's cheaper to go and buy a new printer than it is to go and buy printer ink, because they're now such a they're so flooded in the market, saturated in the market. It's so disposable. It's easier to throw away your old one and buy a new one rather than go and buy some ink. So at what price point does that happen with a projector, where it might only last 1,000 hours, 2,000 hours, but you can junk it and then go get another one? Yeah,
it's true. I mean, I think there's a lot of misinformation when it comes to projectors. You're absolutely right, Phil. If you buy a 600 quid single chip DLP projector, you're going to get a good 2,000 hours at least out of that in terms of bulb brightness, and you're not going to be using it every day. It's not something you're going to use to watch everything on. So 2,000 hours, that's easily a few years before you'd even have to consider bulb brightness being an issue. And I'm sure after 3 or 4 or 5 years, you'll be more than happy to buy another projector at that price point. What you're getting in the meantime is you're getting the opportunity to take it out every now and then, and they are very small and very light and very easy to set up. You know, you just need a white wall that's reasonably flat to project onto it, so there's no space being taken up, it's no hassle. And when you see a reasonably well done big screen image projected onto a wall, there's nothing like it. And unfortunately, most people's experiences of projectors tend to be in a pub, which is not the best environment for a projected image to be done. When they see at home, you think a football match or a movie or even a game on a big screen, it's a really immersive experience. And you know, people will spend an absolute fortune buying 65-inch TVs or 75-inch TVs.
You see, I think that's the other point that I wanted to make as well, and it's something that was, you know, it was rammed home to me sort of this week, where I've got this Epson in for a review. I don't use my cinema room enough. I'm lucky enough to have one. I don't use it enough, and I only ever use it for watching films on a big screen. The biggest screen TV that I have is 50 inches. That's fine for watching TV, for streaming Netflix, watching the odd thing, back catalogue thing here and there. When I want the big screen effect and I want to watch a movie the way it's supposed to be intended to be seen, I'll go and watch it on the projector. Now, I'm lucky to have a dedicated room, but there's nothing stopping anybody doing that in their living room, and it's just such an event. It just makes the film more enjoyable, because it's not on your 65-inch TV or your 70-inch TV. It's 100 inches But I think if you did that every day and watched the 6 o'clock news at 100 inches, you become used to it, and then it doesn't have that impact anymore. So I think it's important to get the impact, to get the full effect from it. You only watch films on it or play games on it at certain points or for certain things. Otherwise, well, it's like your TVs. You become used to a 50-inch TV very, very quickly, even though it is big. It is a big amount of real estate in your room, even though they're flat screens. They're still, but then put a 65-inch in, and the 50 looks tiny. It makes sense.
Well, yeah, I've had that experience with the 84-inch, and my 50-inch looked like a portable when I put it back up again. Yeah, I think you bang for buck. You can't be a projector if you want a nice big image at a very realistic price. You're not going to get a 100-inch TV for 600 quid, not even close. You're going to be spending 10, 20 grand on something that big. Get a projector in. It's taking up no space whatsoever. It's dead easy to set up, and I'll tell you what, it'll probably look better as well, because you haven't got to worry about backlight uniformity and that kind of stuff. I mean, these projectors are relatively uniform. I'm not saying they're perfect. Obviously, the lenses are pretty cheap in these things, given the price point. But, the ones I've put up, and I've got, like you, Phil, got a big screen. I've got a 10-foot wide scope screen. And even these projectors, which aren't the biggest in the world and quite cheap, they can still put up a very, very good image onto a big screen. So, bang for buck, projector's the way to go.
Yeah, obviously we're not talking about reference quality levels here.
No,
perfectly calibrated images and all the rest of it. That's for your more expensive projectors, dedicated rooms, or rooms that are made for a projector. We're just talking about for the money you can get these things, the performance that you can get for the money. It really is worth going and have a look at it. If you've got any inkling whatsoever having a big screen at home, go and have a look at these things, and I think you'll be surprised if you haven't seen a projector for a number of years. I think you will be surprised at the level of performance, motion handling, colours are usually quite good. Just take it out of the box settings, put it in something half decent, and the look half decent. Just don't expect really inky deep black levels and all the rest of it. You won't get that, but you will get an enjoyable image. And for stuff like sports and gaming, it's absolutely perfect. And the odd movie now and again, spot on. There you go. Useful consumer advice from the AVForums podcast.
For once.
Have you not been to the cinema, Steve?
No, not this weekend. I wasn't well.
All right. Okay.
It's half an hour to fill.
Yeah. Can you just monologue about your illness or something?
Like Alan Bennett.
I remember I had a nice cup of tea. And
But we need to have our scheduled pee break, and it's not here this week.
I've already been.
Right, games news is next. Right, Mark, games news.
Oh, that was the segue. Sorry. I missed it. It was too slick for me, Phil.
The clue was in games news.
Yeah.
Well, in all fairness.
There's usually a follow-up question, though, in fairness.
Not really. Not this time.
Fair enough. Yeah, not much really going on, other than just today the news came in that PlayStation Home is going to be shutting down. Sony of Japan had already announced back in August that it was their version in Asia was going to shut down for March 2015, but now it's going to be the same for the US and Europe. It was one of Sony's kind of little experiments into social gaming. Started back in late 2008 on the PlayStation 3. It was really kind of emulating the trend of the day, which was Second Life, and you had The Sims, and it seemed like this idea of creating little social spaces for people to congregate was going to be a good idea to try and tie in with networked consoles and the like. And so people created avatars, and you got houses and furnished them and added clothes to your wardrobe. The problem was it kind of stalled. I can't see too many people mourning its loss. It was basically an advertising space. There were various mini games. You could go to, say, like a movie theater and see particular conferences and interviews. Things got streamed there. It was clunky in the early days. I think a lot of people tried it, left fairly soon after. It had a kind of small, fairly dedicated community, as virtually everything has. But it never migrated to the PS4, and it seems to have just slowly kind of died away. Cue questions.
I don't. Well. I think I very briefly looked at it ages ago when I got my PS3, and it was one of those. I don't understand this. I'm assuming it's for youth, and then I just left it. So I dare say, if more people thought like me, then that probably explains where it went.
Yes, Ed, it's for the young people.
Yeah. I don't begrudge the young people having their things. That's fine. I've got my things. They've got their things. But, just don't expect me to understand it.
No, well, it was kind of console's attempt to try and tap into social gaming. The one of the problems has always been the fact that people on consoles, most people don't just have a keyboard or a little kind of chat keyboard plugged in all the time. Not that many people on Sony consoles, even now on the PS4, bother with things like microphones. So predominantly it's kind of turned into a group of avatars turning up, kind of pointing at things using chat gestures and the like, and then people really asking what it was for. It had a few games, but really there was no way to kind of tie it into launching into other games or to make the content that appealing that someone would bother to go in there. They tried with bonus content, so go in if you pre-ordered games through there, then you could get various bonuses. But ultimately it was, as with most things, like with MMOs going over to consoles, it just never really stuck. It seemed like it was almost an idea to see whether consoles were going to get the same ideas and the same crowds as the PCs, but it just never really happened, never really took off.
And is that the games news?
That is the games news.
Right, so we move on to movie news, and as we've already heard, Steve didn't make it to the cinema this week. That poor cinema chain's going to go out of business. Were you not turning up and watching 16 films in one day, Steve?
Well, they don't make any money out of me watching 16 films in one day. So.
Do you not buy cinema snacks and other nastiness?
I try not to, because that way I'm falling into their trap.
Do you smuggle your own in?
Yeah. Yeah, I do. I've got a sausage roll in my pocket or something like that.
That's what he told the police. Don't buy it, kids.
I occasionally buy a latte from the counter. But I just won't pay their extortionate prices for a bag of sweets. It's ridiculous.
Well, that's fair enough, I suppose.
And the hot dogs are inedible.
Oh God, I can't even begin to imagine buying hot food in a cinema.
No,
you just look at the stuff and it's just like. I mean, you'd have to have been starved for some length of time before the Milton Keynes Cineworld nachos looks like a viable foodstuff, more so than, say, the cardboard container that they come in.
That would be more nutritious, I suspect.
No, I think they're about the same.
The only thing that looks even slightly edible on a sort of hot day would be maybe some of the Ben & Jerry's ice cream. That would be okay, but otherwise it's just avoid it all at the plague, really.
I hate Ben & Jerry's. Well, I don't. Ben & Jerry's stuff tastes all right. I just hate we're such a small, friendly company.
Yeah.
Another monstrous conglomerate turning out factories.
Here we go. How long we got for this rant then, Ed?
I don't know.
Strap in.
I have to say
you can all go for a piss now, lads, because he's going to be going for at least 10 minutes. On a
non-ranty set, one thing that you can buy, those Maynard sour kids things.
Yes.
They look like jelly beans, but they're covered. I think they're dusted with crack because they are quite Moorish. They're really nice. That's normally my cinema go-to thing. If I'm going to buy anything there.
I like to buy a bag of retro sweets with things like blackjacks in them and fruit cocktails and the kind of things we used to get when we were kids for half a p. It doesn't cost half a p anymore, obviously. But
I always buy popcorn, and I always forget just how horrible it is.
You see, I've never forgotten. It's one of those things where, but basically, if I suddenly needed packaging to send a review product back, popcorn's quite legitimate as a substance for that. But I'd never risk eating the bloody stuff.
Well, no, I used it as a alternative snack at home when I'm watching movies because there isn't anything in it. It's just popped corn, as opposed to me, having a Mars bar or something like that, which is quite more fattening. So
I do remember I had wasabi.
So do you have your popcorn with absolutely nang on it?
Again, so it's like eating polystyrene chips.
Yeah. It's like eating polystyrene, but at least it's not. I'm not gaining any weight. It's filling you up with nothing.
Excellent. You know how to live with us. I need to eat, but I can't gain weight. Let's just eat this bland anodyne stuff. I remember having wasabi popcorn a couple of years ago. That was good stuff.
That's nice.
came with a bit of a good kick to it, but I have no idea how one would go about making that in a domestic sense.
Unfortunately, our chef's not here on his podcast.
I'm going to say, sounds like a question for Hodge.
But,
anyway, so in answer to the question half an hour ago, no, I didn't get a chance to go to the cinema this week. But we can happily talk about the Blu-rays that are out this week.
Oh, somebody has to stick to a running order, eh? Okay, so we have A Million Ways to Die in the West, The Devil's Knot, 24, Live Another Day, and Dracula 1979.
Million Ways to Die in the West is the new film from Seth MacFarlane, live action, follow-up to Ted. Not as successful as Ted, has to be said. Didn't do very well at the box office because basically it wasn't as funny as it should have been. Ted, I think, was genuinely funny. A Million Ways to Die in the West is funny in places, not consistently so. You just felt like I expected more from MacFarlane, frankly. There were too many easy gags and too many gags that just didn't work. And I don't think he should have cast himself in the lead. I think that was probably a big, he had a nasty case of hubris on that one, I think. So he hasn't done that very well. He's now...
Is that like shingles?
Well, hubris.
Yeah.
Not quite.
Okay, fine.
He's now busy making Ted 2 because clearly he's going back to that particular well. And I think everyone likes talking teddy bear, so that swears a lot. So he'll do better on that. But yeah, this has been a bit of a failure for him. Devil's Knot is the new film from what's his name? Atom Goyan. I actually saw it months ago on Netflix, where it's available on Netflix US. It came out much later in the UK at the cinema, and it's just comes out on Blu-ray this next week. I saw it, like I said, and it's an interesting film. It deals with an actual case, an actual murder case, and what many people believe to be a miscarriage of justice, including even the mother of one of the victims. But it doesn't have a conclusion. It kind of addresses the case, shows you the evidence and what happened, and where they think who they think the real killers are. But there is no actual conclusion to the film. But I thought it was a pretty good movie. Yeah, it's got some good performances from people like Colin Firth and Reese Witherspoon. 24 Live Another Day is the new series of 24. It was on Sky very recently, back in the summer. More Jack Bauer, more tortures, more shootings, more terrorists, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. If you like a bit of Jack action, you won't go wrong. And Dracula 1979 version with Frank Langella, directed by John Badham. That Blu-ray comes out next week. The review is already up by Chris. He's a bit of a fan of the movie. I've got to say, I do enjoy the film. It's one of the better adaptations, I think. Langella's very good as Dracula. It's based upon the stage play, but it's pretty faithful to the book. And I enjoyed it. And so did Chris. I think it's one of his favourites Dracula movies.
How long is the running time of that movie?
Well, it'll be shorter to watch the movie than read Chris's review, if that's what you're getting at.
One for the fans, I think.
What, the review or the film?
I'll let the audience decide.
But certainly, if you are a fan of that particular film, worth checking out.
Okay, Shawshank Redemption was the film we quoted from right at the beginning of the podcast. It's now 20 years old and has become a bit of a loved classic. However, we all know that when it was first released, it bombed. And it's only since it came onto the home formats and word of mouth and so on that it actually became really quite a popular movie. So what other films have been failures when they were originally released but have since gone on to become classics? And I'll kick things off with the one that everybody thinks it was a major hit when it first came out, and that was The Wizard of Oz, and it tanked.
Yep, that's true. It's I think a lot of films, and The Wizard of Oz is a good example, have become successful or popular through continuous repeat screenings on TV at Christmas. And this is definitely the granddaddy of them all, isn't it, in terms of gaining a popularity through, initially, I think, TV screenings, seasonal TV screenings, and then obviously home video. But it was a failure when it came out. It didn't do very well at all. I mean, admittedly, it came out in what I can only describe as a really busy year. 1939 was a year of so many great movies that somehow it got lost in the mix, but it wasn't a success. And now, of course, everyone, you think massive classics, have had numerous reissues, hugely successful on home video. It's just had literally in the last couple of months had a 3D reissue in this country. With people flocking to see it, and I do like the film. I think it's great, but you're right, Phil. It did not do very well when it came out.
I love there is the synopsis, the alternative synopsis for this film, and it is hilarious. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's really, really funny. Go search it out. It's on the internet, people. We're not going to spoil it for you. So that's one. There were others round about the same kind of time. What's the one at Christmas? I keep forgetting the name of it.
It's a Wonderful Life.
That's the one.
Because, I mean, that became the cult classic through an accident of licensing. I wasn't cutting you off on this. Were you about to say this, or is this something...
No, hey, Ed, knock us out.
Right, well, It's a Wonderful Life became synonymous with Christmas because, for whatever reason, it fell through the gaps in a licensing agreement with television studios. And it was missed off the list of ones that they had to pay an extra license fee for to show on television. So it was essentially free for them to use. So they would wheel it out every Christmas without fail because it cost them nothing to do. And if you show something every Christmas for 35 years, it sort of becomes synonymous with that event. But as I understand it, at the cinema, it was a bit of a non-starter. It is, when you actually take stock and view it objectively, it's a very weird it doesn't necessarily always sit happily as a sort of family Christmas film. It's got a bloke trying to top himself when it boils down to it. You know,
yeah, you're right.
so,
it takes place at Christmas, but it's not. It is a dark film. It goes to some very dark places.
Yeah,
I think it's a great film. It's just it didn't do well at the time. It's obviously never made its makers any money if they've been playing it for free on Christmas for the last 70 years.
But Christmas films aren't necessarily synonymous with light. I mean, A Christmas Carol isn't exactly the lightest story.
Yeah.
Well, there's an element of redemption to it, though, isn't there?
But so in It's a Wonderful Life as well.
And then you got Die Hard.
Yeah,
well,
exactly.
Die Hard 2 is the best Christmas film ever made. We need to be clear about this.
Die Hard 2?
Yes.
What?
Not Die Hard?
No, Die Hard 2.
Why is Die Hard 2 the best Christmas film ever made?
Well, but they're both...
Because it's got
Christmas.
snow.
Yeah.
And that's a key ingredient to any Christmas film. It just, and also for whatever reason, it just shows up more. And it's set at Christmas.
Oh, so is Die Hard.
So
well, yeah, but it's
on
in
Christmas Eve.
Sunny California. It just doesn't look right, does it? And also for whatever reason, it just gets shown by British television channels more often at Christmas than the original Die Hard. Possibly because it cost them less. It is. Whilst being one of the greatest Christmas film ever made, it's also perhaps until the last Die Hard came along, it was the weakest of the four. But without the fifth one is a pile of ordure that just needs to be sort of dealt with secondary to the first four, and even the fourth is a bit odd. But in terms of it's got strange baddies, even by the standards of Die Hard. Anyone with the Die Hard film, anyone with a rudimentary understanding of geography will realise that closing down Dulles Airport isn't too much of a problem because there's like 5 others within a radius of 10 miles. But that's
You're telling me it's not true.
I'm telling you that even by the fantastical standards of a fire sale shutting down North America, Die Hard 2's got some very specific problems all of its own.
But they don't shut down Dulles, aren't they? Controlling the aircraft from Dulles.
Well, yes, but in the sense that you could divert everything else away. Keep
but who? Because the tower wasn't in control of their planes, was it? They'd taken over control.
Yeah,
of the
but
planes,
they could have kept they could have kept their hostages in hand by like 1 or 2 planes, but everything else could just sodded off. Or put it like this: when they reach their critical fuel state, airliners, as I understand it, do not necessarily need clearance on the tower to go to their alternate. So they'd have just sodded off to their alternate, which was about 2 minutes away. Has
someone seen too much Air Crash Investigations or whatever it's called?
Maybe. But that's I still think it's a great Christmas film.
Right, so some others which we think has been popular but actually tanked, and this next one was an epic, and I think it cost more that much to make. It was never going to make a profit, and that's Cleopatra.
Yeah, that one was. Even if it had been the most successful film of all time, it was probably going to struggle to make any money. It actually didn't do that. I mean, I think it's a bit of a misnomer. People think that Cleopatra bombed, but actually it was quite successful. It's just unfortunately it cost so much to make, and 40 million it cost in 1960, when 40 million was a lot of money. That's equivalent to like sort of 2-3. Although bizarrely, it's equivalent to like 250 million now, which is how much a big budget tentpole movie does cost. So that gives you an idea of how much inflation has been in film production over the last few years. That now films cost as much as Cleopatra, but people aren't, betting the farm on it. The problem with when Cleopatra came out was it was the only film Fox had in production, and they were like, it was going to destroy the entire studio if it hadn't at least made some of its money back, which it did ultimately do. A film you've always mentioned, Phil, which I agree with, and another Christmas movie is is Love Actually.
Yeah.
Which again was not well received when it came out. Didn't do particularly well at the box office, but has become a bit of a favourite over the last 10 years.
It wasn't well received because it's not very good. Let's be very clear about this. This isn't a overlooked classic. It's not a desperately good film, but there's just enough Richard Curtis in it to mean that people like my dad, after he's got a reasonable quantity of alcohol in him, will just quite happily sort of sit there and let it happen to him. And he and millions of others have ensured that it's made its money back.
I've got to say it's a guilty pleasure. I actually do like it. I hated it when it first came out. I did not, but no, I've got to say.
And mine boggles because you watch it sober. I couldn't do that.
Ed, my life is sober.
I know it is, but even so, doesn't part of your brain start itching for some sort of like chemical kosh after about 20 minutes of it? Or am I just revealing that my psyche is seriously shot to bits?
It's a guilty pleasure. It's not just one of my guilty pleasures. Steve, you've admitted to liking it, so
yeah, no, it's grown on me over the years. I didn't like it when I first saw it, but it's grown on me over the years. Same goes for a film I mentioned earlier on at the beginning of the podcast, Danny Boyle's Sunshine, which I saw at the cinema and thought, what a load of cobblers. And then over the years, I've actually realised that it's not quite as much cobblers as I thought it was. Particularly after listening to the commentary track on the Blu-ray with Professor Brian Cox, who was the advisor on the film, explaining some of the science behind it, and then you kind of appreciate the film a little more. It's still not perfect, but it has grown on me.
It made my wife so angry she stormed out of the cinema because it doesn't deal with the unless you're about to explain something magical. It doesn't fully explain how the ships pass through the corona, which is like monstrously hotter than the sun itself.
Yeah, I think that's just science fiction.
Ed,
yeah,
it's the movies.
Well, yeah, but don't talk to me about, we put some scientific thought into it when you didn't deal with the biggest problem of the whole moronic concept of going to the sun. You might as well say, well, we're sending him at night, it'll be fine.
I'll give you a few more. Blade Runner.
Oh, yeah.
That was a
well, that's because the actual cinematic original cut is incomprehensible.
Well, it's not incomprehensible, but it did suffer from, I think, not being what people expected to be, i.e. an action-packed Harrison Ford movie. Citizen Kane was a huge bomb on its initial release.
Rosebud.
How much did The Usual Suspects make at the cinema? Do you know?
That was quite successful.
It was for the budget. It was successful. I think it was only about 8 or 9 million. It was a shoestring.
Yeah, it was mainly around.
Actually, I saw that at the cinema by accident, and I can't remember what the film.
You fell in.
1 minute to the cinema.
Well, no, actually, we went to the cinema, and the film we wanted to see, which was being shown on 6 of the 7 screens, was sold out on 6 of the 7 screens, and there was only this film that I'd never heard of playing on the other screen, and we decided, all right, we'll go and see that. And I don't think I've ever come out of the cinema like that ever before with the people I was with, and we used to have to travel 60 miles to the cinema. This is when I lived in Scotland, so to go to the cinema was a bit of an event. And that drive back home from the cinema, I can't remember any because we were talking so much about that movie. Absolutely loved it, and I knew nothing about it going in, and I've tried not to talk about it ever since, because I think as soon as you know what the twist is, the film just doesn't stand up. But if you go into it cold and you don't know what it's all about, it is really, really, really well done. Yeah, it might bomb now, but one day people may look back and see just what a classic the AVForums podcast really is. And that's it for another week. My thanks to Steve Withers.
I hope to see my friend and shake his hand. I hope the Pacific is as blue as it has been in my dreams. I hope.
Mark Botwright.
I don't belong here.
Well, actually you don't, because on the running order it says Mark Hodgkins.
Is it?
At least I didn't go into character like Steve. What was that, method acting? Did you black up as well or something? Hell, Christ almighty.
And Ed Selley.
I had your mother. She wasn't that great.
Don't forget, you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Bookmark avforums.com for latest reviews, news and video. Plus, why not leave us a rating on iTunes if you enjoyed the show. I'm Phil Hinton, thanks for listening, and we'll see you again next Wednesday.